He opened his eyes. All that he could see before him was black. There he was, in the dark darkness that spread like a shroud before his eyes, unable to distinguish any shape. He thought there was something wrong with his eyes, so he blinked. Even after closing and opening his eyes a few times, all he could still see was thick darkness. He tried to move his limbs, but it felt like they were tied with chains. His body didn't move the way he wanted it to. There was no strength in his hands or feet. His whole body felt helpless. The only thing he could move was his eyelids. The rest of his body refused to obey. "There is nothing wrong with my eyes." He couldn't be sure since he couldn't even recognize his own limbs right away, but instinctively he realized his eyes were fine. That meant the problem wasn't with his vision, but with the space itself, an unusually dark place with no light entering. Underground, he thought of the possibility. He had never heard of a building that could block out light so perfectly. Why did this happen? He slowly searched his memories. Who was he, and why was he in this situation? His head throbbed when he tried to recall. It felt as if his brain had been struck. Bit by bit, fragments of memory returned. "My name is Pyoel. I am 14 years old. A drifter who aimlessly wandered the world like an orphan without parents." Eventually, he fully recalled who he was. Now came the bigger question: why was he here? Him, Pyoel recalled the man in his last memory. A middle-aged man with a plain face and eyes that were unnaturally sharp. The man he had stumbled upon while begging, who said, "You look good enough." That was the last thing Pyoel remembered. Right after those words, he lost consciousness. When he awoke, he was in this darkness. The man must be connected to why he was trapped here. There must be some kind of purpose, some goal. If his captor had wanted him dead, they would have killed him outright. There was no reason to keep him alive unless he had a use. His head pounded harder. Thinking in this condition drained him. Whether his eyes were open or shut, it made no difference. Still, keeping them closed hurt less. "My name is Pyoel, 14 years old. My father's name is Pyo In-hak. My mother's name is Lee Sun-hong." Among the chaos of thoughts, he focused only on his identity. The only way to stay sane was to root himself in who he was. He didn't know how much time passed. It could have been a day. Or weeks. Time was meaningless here. His body remained paralyzed, his functions barely active. Even hunger didn't strike him at first. It was like dying alive, the most terrifying moment of his life. Little by little, sensations spread through his body. Power entered his fingertips. His sense of smell returned. The damp, moldy air confirmed this place was underground, as he had guessed. He had been close to breaking. If time had stretched further, he would have gone insane. Or maybe he already had. It didn't matter. What mattered was his body was waking. But with that came hunger. As his organs reawakened, he felt it gnaw at him. The twisting emptiness in his stomach was unbearable. His mouth was dry, his breath foul. Anger welled in his chest. Anger turned to hatred. What the hell did I do wrong? He had asked himself dozens of times. He had done nothing. He hadn't even begged from the man. He was just passing by. But the man had grabbed him and thrown him into this hell. He bit his lip, tearing flesh, tasting blood. The warmth of it reassured him. He was still alive. More time passed. Now his fingers obeyed. His ankles turned. He was still starving, still parched, but he wasn't without hope. His heightened hunger sharpened his senses. He smelled moisture, heard faint trickles of water. What he needed most now was a sip of it. He felt he could sell his soul just for water. He didn't want to starve anymore, didn't want to thirst anymore. So he tried to move. He gathered strength into his abdomen, then forced it into his limbs. His long, idle body felt like dry firewood. He had no time for careful recovery. If he didn't move soon, he would die. Power surged. Finally, with one last effort, he rolled over. With a scream, he collapsed, feeling the cold, damp floor against his chin and forehead. Shivering at the sensation, he began to crawl desperately toward the sound of running water. He writhed like a snake, dragging himself forward. His jaw tore open, blood smearing the floor, but he didn't stop. Time felt like eternity. At last, he reached the wall. He struck his forehead against it, blood splattering. He didn't care. He stuck out his tongue. Moisture, water, the taste filled his mouth. In the suffocating dark, the only sound was that of him desperately drinking water. Water drops trickled down the curved side of the wall. Though it was only a small amount, it was the water of life that allowed Pyoel to cling to existence. After drinking enough, Pyoel's rationality returned little by little. His eyes still hadn't adapted to the dark. Eventually, he gave up relying on sight and reached out to feel the wall. It was slippery, damp from flowing water. His fingers brushed over small protrusions. Moss. Moss thrived where water flowed, especially in such a humid place. He scraped some with his nail and tore it off. He couldn't see what kind it was. Some moss was edible, some poisonous. Without sight, all he had was touch. His hesitation didn't last long. Even if it was poison he had to eat, he shoved the moss into his mouth. Bitterness exploded across his tongue, a hellish taste that nearly made him gag. Tears and mucus streamed down his face. In all his years wandering after his parents' deaths, scavenging anything he could to survive, he had never tasted something so vile. But he didn't spit it out. Though it was torture, no other symptoms followed. His taste buds were numb, but his body felt no worse. That meant it was edible. He scraped the wall again, stuffing more moss into his mouth. Once his tongue was dulled, the taste no longer mattered. It was still horrible, but tolerable. Grinding the moss between his teeth, Pyoel murmured silently to himself, "I can live. I can survive." His tongue was numb, his voice barely a whisper, but his determination remained sharp. He had to live for revenge, or at the very least to know why he was imprisoned. Pressing a hand against the wall, he began to explore. 10 steps, then a wall, another 10, another wall, a rectangular space about 3 square meters. As he traced the walls, his fingertips caught on something different. A long, thin line, a door. He knocked. The sound was dull but distinct, an iron gate. He searched for a latch or handle, but the surface was smooth. It could only be opened from the outside. There was no escape. He didn't know how much time had passed. He ate moss when hungry, licked water when thirsty. The silence was absolute, the darkness unending. Anyone else would have gone mad. He repeated his name to keep his mind intact, resisting the temptation of surrender. But sometimes, death called to him. One day, he sensed something strange. When he looked up, he saw a figure staring down at him, thin, hollow-eyed. Himself, his own reflection, his inner self. "What?" he asked. The shadow answered, "Why are you enduring? Just give up, let go, and it will be easier. You have nothing, nothing to protect. Why struggle so hard? I refuse to die like this. I'll survive and kill the one who put me here. Only then can I rest." The inner self stared back. "So you'll live for revenge? Yes. You won't give up, never." The shadow smiled. So did Pyoel. Then it vanished. He realized it was no dream. It had been his heart demon. If he hadn't overcome it, he would have gone insane. He had passed another trial. Suddenly, the small hatch at the bottom of the iron gate clanged open. A faint light pierced the darkness. Even that dim glow stabbed at his eyes like knives. A small plate slid through the opening. Then the hatch closed again. The smell reached him first. Food. Pyoel hastily brought the plate to his face. An unfamiliar smell assaulted his nose. He couldn't tell what kind of food it was, but it was clear this was a mix of scraps, likely leftovers thrown together. Still, compared to moss, it was a feast. Pyoel separated each odor one by one. He compared them against his memories: rotten fish, tea leaves, pork bone scraps. There were at least 5 different foods mixed on that small plate. It was astonishing that he could even tell. More importantly, he detected no poison, only discarded scraps. To most, it would be rotting garbage. To Pyoel, it was valuable proof that others existed outside this dungeon. If there were 5 different kinds of food, that meant at least 5 different people had eaten them. Judging by the varying states of spoilage, they hadn't eaten at the same time. Different meals, different people. And beneath it all, faint human sense lingered, at least 5 different ones. So I'm not the only one. The space he was trapped in was far too elaborate to be made for a single prisoner. The cost, manpower, and secrecy required proved it was no act of an obsessed individual. At least 5 people are running this place, and there must be more prisoners like me. His thoughts spun endlessly. What is their purpose? Why build such a place? He couldn't yet answer. One plate of scraps wasn't enough to piece together their motives, but he didn't worry. Time was all he had. He would keep thinking, again and again, until the truth revealed itself. For now, there was no poison. Pyoel carefully picked at the food. This too was a gamble, but he needed nutrition. Moss alone could not restore his body. He scooped it up with his hands and shoved it into his mouth. The noise of him eating echoed in the darkness. The taste was awful, but still better than moss. The food came once a day, though Pyoel couldn't measure exact time. He only guessed based on instinct and the rhythm of his body. Each portion was just enough to barely survive. The contents changed daily, but 2 things were always present: pork and hot spices. That meant pork and spices were easy to acquire here. A place rich in pigs and chili, such places were rare. But Pyoel had wandered since childhood. He knew one such land, Sichuan province. It was easy to go mad here, especially if he stayed idle, so he moved. He walked along the walls, over and over, until he collapsed from exhaustion. Like a hamster in a wheel, calluses formed on his feet, and muscles slowly returned to his legs. Movement made his hunger worse, but he endured by eating moss when scraps weren't enough. Then, when his legs grew stronger, he began push-ups. At first, even 10 left him breathless. But he persisted day after day, and the number grew. Months passed. Though he couldn't see, he felt his body changing. Skinny still, but beneath the skin, solid muscle grew. He fought not against an enemy, but against himself. The battle never stopped. His body also became his clock. He measured time by his hunger, by his waste, by the clarity of his mind. Then another change came. His eyes, slowly, painfully, they adapted to the dark. At first only vague shapes, then faint outlines. Enough to stop being completely blind. The cell was exactly as he imagined. Bare stone, square and desolate. A pile of his own filth reeked in a corner, swarming with insects. In the past, such a sight would have horrified him. Now, fear and disgust had long since withered away. One day, pain shot through his wrist like a needle stabbing him. Startled, he looked and saw a small snake, its eyes pale and degenerated like the insect's, sinking its fangs into him. It coiled tightly, hissing. Pyowol tried to fling it off, but heat exploded in his head. Poison! That was his last thought before he collapsed. The snake slithered away, back into the swarm of insects, leaving Pyowol writhing. Fire raged through his veins, muscles seized, nerves burned, organs twisted in agony. His eyes went blood red, as if about to burst. Yet no scream left his lips. His body was too stiff, his jaw locked. He endured the torment fully conscious, perhaps the cruelest effect of the venom. 3 days passed like this. Each moment stretched like an eternity, worse than all the months he had endured before. At last, on the 3rd day, the paralysis broke. The fire subsided. He had survived, but at a cost. His body was battered, his organs and nerves shredded by poison. Recovery would take time. Barely alive, he dragged himself across the floor toward the iron gate. A plate of food lay waiting. His mouth was dry, his taste gone, but he shoved his face into the scraps. As he licked the plate clean, he whispered hoarsely, "I won't die, no matter what." In the darkness, his bloodshot eyes glowed. Pyowol glanced at the snake passing near him. It was the one responsible for biting his wrist. He almost died because of the snake's venom. But he felt no animosity. The cold reptile was the first one to settle down in this underground space earlier than him. If anything, Pyowol was the one intruding. Pyowol did not particularly hate or fear the snake, since it did it out of survival. The snake had to bite for it to live. The snake slaughtered a large insect at the corner where Pyowol usually deposited his feces. While his eyes had slowly adapted to the darkness, he had never seen so clearly as he does now. It seemed that some change had taken place inside his body when he fought against the poison that penetrated him. He had heard of stories of people becoming stronger from surviving after being poisoned before. Pyowol thought that it would be the case for himself. The problem was that not only did he gain resistance to poison, some changes have also taken place in his body. It seemed that the poison had a synergistic effect and affected his eyesight. There was only one way to confirm his guess. Pyowol caught the body of the snake that was eating an insect and returned to where he was prior. The captured snake immediately opened its mouth wide and dug its fangs at the back of Pyowol's hand. The effect was immediate. He could feel the heat rising from the back of his hand. It was enough proof that the poison had started to penetrate his body. Pyowol prepared for the pain by gritting his teeth. Having resistance to the poison did not diminish the pain at all. Like Pyowol predicted, he could feel the excruciating pain at the sight of the snake's bite. Scorching heat rushed through his veins as if it was trying to burn his whole body. It was painful. He almost regretted his decision, but the pain was more bearable than he thought. The first bite had left him completely paralyzed, while the second time did not. Sure, it was still painful, but he could still endure it. When a day passed, the pain started to completely disappear. Pyowol was soon convinced that he had finally developed poison tolerance. It may only be towards a certain type of poison, but it was clear that he had his own weapon that others didn't know about. His vision also seemed to have gotten a little clearer. For the first time, a smile graced Pyowol's lips. It was the first smile he made after being locked up in an underground space. Snakes were exceptional hunters. It could approach the prey without making a sound and kill it at once. It stealthily concealed its presence so that even vigilant insects would not notice. Occasionally, there would be insects who noticed the appearance of a snake, and when that happened, it made a peculiar cry. Then, the movements of the worms hardened like a lie. It could incapacitate its prey using sound. But even so, the snake was not greedy. It didn't make the mistake of intimidating insects around it and chasing them away. The appearance of such a snake attracted Pyowol's interest. So besides dedicating his time in training his stamina, Pyowol would also come and observe the snake. For Pyowol, watching the snake was his only means of entertainment. Pyowol unknowingly fell in love with the snake's movements. To increase his strength, he tried to imitate the movement of a snake as he walked around the room. He practiced trying to navigate through the darkness without a sound or presence. Pyowol opened his eyes to the sudden vibration. In an instant, a look of disbelief appeared on his face. It was because the iron door that had kept him locked up here for a long time was opening on its own. Pyeolwol stood up. Soon the iron door was wide open. There was no difference in scenery between the inside of his room and the outside. The pitch-black darkness that covered his eyes and the humid air that irritated his skin remained. Pyeolwol came out of the iron gate and looked around. Outside the door was a large hallway. On his left side were numerous rooms with doors all wide opened. Pyeolwol moved to the room adjacent to his room. He had to walk approximately 20 steps to reach the next room. Given the size of his room, which was only about 3 square meters or around 10 steps in each direction, there would be another 10 steps left that would serve as a barrier in between the rooms. So that's why I couldn't sense the presence of others. No matter how sensitive his senses were, they would not be able to overcome the thickness of the wall. Pyeolwol looked inside the room. An awful stench stirred his nose. It was the smell of rotting flesh. Someone's body had been left decaying in the darkness. The foul odor indicated that the decomposition had already progressed considerably. Pyeolwol went into the room and inspected the body, ignoring the foul smell. The deceased had its face collapsed, so he couldn't tell in much detail, but judging from the build of the skeleton, he could tell that it was a boy of the same age as him. Perhaps the boy was also imprisoned here at the same time as him. The situation in the other rooms was the same. Unlike Pyeolwol, they could not endure hunger and died of starvation. Their room was as humid as Pyeolwol's room, so it was full of moss. They probably did not seem to consider consuming the moss. In the darkness, Pyeolwol's eyes flashed red. He continued to walk straight down the hallway. 20 rooms passed, and 20 bodies were also found, one corpse per one room. Pyeolwol soon reached the end of the hallway. There was a large iron door blocking the hallway. The iron gate was much thicker and larger compared to the ones that blocked their rooms. The bolts of the gate were also taken out. Pyeolwol pushed the door hard and the towering iron gate opened slowly. Beyond the iron gate, the same hallway where Pyeolwol had been imprisoned continued, and again, 20 iron gates were lined up in a row. The only difference is that there was only one survivor in the area where Pyeolwol was, but in the new section, there were as many as 2 survivors here. It was a boy and a girl who seemed to be of the same age. They looked in the direction where Pyeolwol appeared with wary eyes. Judging by their actions, it seemed that their eyes were not perfectly adapted to the darkness like Pyeolwol. It was clear that they had noticed the appearance of a new character through the sound of Pyeolwol's footsteps. Their pricked-up ears were proof. Pyeolwol only looked at them without saying a word. Both the boy and girl were skinny, as if they had not eaten properly. But compared to Pyeolwol, they still seemed to be in better shape. Pyeolwol glanced at the next room. A body was seen through the door. He could see a food bowl next to the body. There's no doubt that there was a sufficient amount of food. So it was either that he died because he could not stand the loneliness and died of madness, or he could not overcome the disease he had acquired underground. One of the survivors spoke cautiously. "Who are you? Where did you come from? He and I are the only survivors in this section." Pyeolwol looked at the girl who asked the question. She was a girl who did not lose her beauty despite being locked in the basement for a long time. She was staring in the direction of the wall like a cat full of poison. However, it seemed that she could not recognize Pyeolwol's appearance since her eyes were not focused. The boy next to the girl also looked in the direction of Pyeolwol with a very wary look. If it was too late, he had the momentum to attack Pyeolwol. Their eyes weren't able to fully adapt to the darkness like Pyeolwol, but their sense of hearing and smell still developed by leaps and bounds. Pyeolwol opened his mouth. "My name is Pyeolwol. I was locked up in the adjacent area. Area next door. So, are you saying there are other places like this?" "It seems so." In response to Pyeolwol's answer, the girl bit her lip. The girl, like Pyeolwol, did not know why they ended up here but was captured and lived for several months. Even as everyone in each of the trapped rooms was dying, she clenched her teeth and endured it until she eventually survived. It was the same with the boy. He had outstanding mental strength, succeeding in overcoming the feelings of despair and loneliness day by day. Pyeolwol asked, "What are your names?" "I'm So Yawol, and he is Song Cheon-woo. Let's go." "Go where?" "I think there are more areas like this." Pyeolwol's gaze was on the other side of the hallway. There was also a huge iron gate similar to what Pyeolwol had passed through. It was proof that another section existed. So Yawol and Song Cheon-woo did not recognize the existence of the iron gate that divided the different sections because they did not have eyes that could see through the dark. So Yawol's voice trembled. "Oh my god, there's more places like this." Pyeolwol took the lead. So Yawol and Song Cheon-woo followed the sound of his footsteps. If they had held hands, they could walk faster, but Pyeolwol didn't. Giving up your hand meant that he would not be able to use it in an emergency. Even though no one had taught him that, Pyeolwol was aware that in order to survive, he must not let anything easily slip into his gap. "Hold my hand." Song Cheon-woo reached out to So Yeowol. Pyeolwol thought that she would hesitate for a moment, but So Yawol immediately grabbed Song Qianwu's hand and followed behind Pyeolwol. As they moved on to the next area, they saw more survivors. This time, there were 5. Like Song Qianwu and So Yawol, they also gathered together and shared information. They were alarmed by the sudden appearance of Pyeolwol, So Yawol, and Song Qianwu. However, So Yawol came forward and explained it calmly, and soon the boundaries were softened. Pyeolwol glanced into the room as the others were having a conversation. Most of the rooms also had decomposing bodies. Unlike Pyeolwol's section, only a few people died of starvation. Instead, most of them showed signs of self-harm. Some had their heads broken, and others showed signs of strangulation. They must have been unable to endure despair, loneliness, and fear, so they chose to commit suicide. It was a harsh environment for children in their teenage years to endure. It only made sense for them to commit suicide. The next thing Pyeolwol looked at was at their food bowl. It was definitely bigger than the food bowl in the area where Pyeolwol was confined, and the amount of food was greater. At least in terms of food, it was clear that they received more rations than the area where Pyeolwol was confined. The survivors continued moving on to the next section. There were a few more survivors in the next area. Around 8 people survived. Whenever they moved to other sections, the number of survivors continued to increase. In the end, the number of those who survived reached a whopping 100, while the number of those who died was more than double. Pyeolwol opened the door to the next area. However, the scenery that appeared this time was different from what he had imagined. A vast underground cavern spread out before their eyes. It was so enormous that, without the torches mounted along the walls, no one could have guessed its size. After months of complete darkness, the sudden blaze of torchlight burned their eyes as though their eyeballs were about to burst. It was painful for Pyeolwol as well. Tears streamed down his cheeks, each stab of light piercing him like needles. He narrowed his eyes, forcing them to adjust. It took a long time before he grew accustomed to the brightness. His vision, honed for pitch darkness, resisted the change. While most of the others still squinted in agony, Pyeolwol ignored them and turned his attention to the cave. The cavern looked natural, with massive stalactites hanging from the ceiling like fangs. Its shape narrowed toward the top, like an overturned bowl. But what drew everyone's attention were the buildings scattered inside. They were crudely built of wood, resembling rough imitations of a manor. "What is this place?" The children gasped. The cavern itself was shocking enough, but the sight of human-made buildings deep underground made their unease grow sharper. Pyeolwol walked toward the nearest structure. So Yawol and Song Qianwu quickly followed, then Li Min and Go Shinnok trailed behind. "There's no one here," Pyeolwol said after peering inside. "Really?" So Yawol frowned with suspicion. They searched the other buildings as well. Every one of them was empty. The children grew unsettled. They had been braced to meet others, captors perhaps, but finding no one only deepened their confusion. While they hesitated, Pyeolwol continued his inspection. The buildings were not old. The wood was fresh, the grain visible, with only a thin layer of dust. They'd clearly been built recently, sometime during the children's imprisonment. Yet the interiors were shoddy and uninhabitable, far worse than their outward appearance. It was as if someone had built them deliberately to look like homes, without ever intending them to be used as such. "It's you, Pyeolwol." The soft voice belonged to Li Min, the girl from the 3rd district. It was her first time seeing him clearly. Unlike Pyeolwol, her eyes had not fully adapted to darkness. Li Min reached out and touched his face. Pyeolwol did not stop her. He was lost in thought. Red eyes. Could it be from the snake venom? Being different was never a blessing, especially in a place where survival meant blending in. Children instinctively rejected those unlike themselves. He had seen it many times while wandering. Fortunately, according to Li Min, his eyes were not always visibly red. Only near torchlight did they seem tinted, otherwise they appeared normal. That, at least, was a relief. "What are you thinking so hard about?" she asked. "Just this and that. You're not like the other children," she said softly. "How so?" "You just are. While we're all panicking, you're the only one thinking." Pyeolwol met her gaze in silence. "What are you two doing?" So Yewol and Song Qianwu approached. "Talking," Li Min replied casually. "Talking about this and that." She shrugged. So Yawol gave her a puzzled look, then turned to Pyeolwol. "Some kids are grouping together. What about you? You'll join us, right?" Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if his answer were obvious. Song Qianwu stood behind her, nodding in agreement. Pyeolwol paused, then said quietly, "We'll see." "What do you mean, we'll see? Are you saying you won't join us?" "I'll wait and watch first." So Yawol blinked, momentarily at a loss. Song Qianwu bristled with anger, ready to lash out, but So Yawol's calm presence restrained him. Pyeolwol had his reasons. So Yawol studied his distant expression, then smiled gently. "Come back if you change your mind. Our door will always be open." Hyowol only nodded. Turning to Li Min, So Yawol asked, "How about you?" "All right, I'll join you." Better to stay together than be alone. She stepped to So Yowl's side. The three returned together, leaving Pyeowol alone, watching their backs disappear. Within hours, factions began to form. The children naturally gravitated toward leaders, so Yawol and Song Cheonwoo, Kang Il, Yam Il-jung, and Go Young-san. Each had a commanding presence that drew others in. Pyawol remained apart, observing. Whispers soon spread about him. You said there were no survivors in his section, right? Then how did he make it out? Did he kill them? The rumors were baseless. Everyone knew the children had been kept in solitary cells. Still, suspicion clung to him. Even among 100 survivors, the cruelty of the outside world had taken root. Like adults, the children feared what was different. They grew wary, envious, and pushed him aside. Pyeowol had endured worse while wandering. He paid them no mind. Survival demanded all of his focus. He explored the cavern, constantly searching for an escape and studying its origin. The crude wooden buildings were recent, but the underground structure itself was ancient. Moss on the walls suggested it had been abandoned for decades before being repurposed. Someone found this place and rebuilt it. Whoever they were, they had vast resources. Constructing such facilities underground was no small feat. Pyeowol was lost in thought when a dull sound rang from above. The children looked up as a beam of light cut through the ceiling. A rope descended, carrying a large basket. It's food. Let's eat. The children, famished since their release, lunged at it like starving beasts. Wait! So Yawol and Son Cheonwoo stepped forward, blocking them. What's your problem? Move. The others growled angrily, ready to attack. But So Yawol spoke firmly. Let's share it equally. She looked to the other faction leaders. Kang Il, Yom Il-jung, and Go Young-sun each nodded in agreement, stepping forward to divide the basket. That was when Pyeowol spoke. Wait! Yom Il-jung's eyes snapped to him, sharp and venomous. What do you want? The other leaders glared too, their gazes carrying the ferocity of beasts. Months in confinement had stripped away their innocence, leaving behind predators in children's skin. I'll take my share, he said simply, lifting some food. Put that down. Yom Il-jung seized his wrist, his face twisted with hostility. No one touches the basket without our permission. Everything here belongs to us. He glanced at So Yawol and the others. They nodded, confirming his claim. Control the food, and you control the people. Even as children, they understood this truth. Food was power, and power was not to be shared with outsiders, especially loners like Pyeowol. Then it happened. A scream tore from Yom Il-jung's throat. He stared in horror. Pyeowol's finger was buried in his left eye. What did you say? Pyeowol asked coldly, pressing deeper. In the glow of torchlight, his eyes gleamed blood red. Pyeowol grabbed Yom Il-jung's neck with his opposite hand and made it impossible to move. The index finger of his right hand was still inserted into Yom Il-jung's eye. From the perspective of Yom Il-jung, a mixture of liquid and red blood was flowing out. Many children shut their eyes at the terrible sight. Let go of him right now. Children following Yom Il-jung surrounded Pyeowol. At that moment, Pyeowol put his finger deeper into Yom Il-jung's eyes. The desperate screams of Yom Il-jung continued to echo in the underground cavity. The eyes of the children, who were about to run to the creepy sight, fell down. This behavior of Pyeowol was far beyond their imagination. They could never have imagined that there would be such a person in the same age group as them. They remember a viper from the figure of the Pyeowol. A small snake with a lot of poison that once bites it, it never lets go. No one dared to stop Pyeowol. They felt like they were going to get beaten up by Pyeowol if they dared to do something. So Yewol came out. She came in front of Pyeowol. He's not in a situation where he can answer, stop it. Why should I? He should have understood after you did that much. What about food? No one will touch your share. So Yawol's last words were directed towards the other children. No one opened their mouths to answer, but their intentions were conveyed to Pyeowol. At that time, Pyeowol pulled out the finger that had been stuck in Yom Il-jung's eye and released the hand that was holding his neck. Yom Il-jung sat down on the spot and covered his pierced eyes with the palm of his hand. He looked at Pyeowol, gritting his teeth. You bastard, what? Do you want me to do the same thing to your other eye? In his heart, he wanted to hit him to death, but the atmosphere in the hall was dominated by him. Pyeowol shrugged his shoulders and moved on. The children in front of him stepped aside. Pyeowol passed by them and climbed onto the roof of a nearby building. The roof of the building has the best place to monitor the area. With what he did to Yom Il-jung just now, Pyeowol made all the children in the underground cavity hostile. This is a test to filter out useful children. Throwing the children one by one in a space completely cut off from the outside was a clear process to filter out useful children. Such a process could not end immediately. This process would be repeated over and over again, and it was clear that many children would continue to die in the process. He could think of cooperating with other children to fight back, but Pyeolwol did not believe that things would turn out so smoothly. It was their intention to drive so many children into one place. It will certainly put the children at risk by testing them in one way or another. Until now, they still haven't appeared and were still forcing the children to survive on their own. If so, it was clear that the same method would be used this time as well, making children kill each other or making them suspicious of each other. If that happens, everyone will be each other's enemy. If they were going to be an enemy anyway, it doesn't matter if they become his enemy a little earlier. Food came down once a day, always at the same time. As the food came down, each group fought a nerve war to get even a little more food. So Yowel, who is a woman, secures the most food for her group. Then, after securing as much food as possible, she still only ate the smallest amount, and she took good care of the children who followed her. What's good staying in a dark place where you couldn't even see anything in front of you? Instead of staying by yourself like this, why not come and join our group? I believe I've already answered that question before. Shouldn't your answer change depending on the situation? Despite Pyeolwol's blunt words, So Yowel did not lose her smile. It was so pretty that it made his eyes dizzy when she smiled lightly. So Yowel's face gained some weight because she ate well and was comfortable. As her health improved, her dazzling beauty also came back. Her beauty was also a big factor in leading her group. In fact, many of So Yowel's followers are those smitten with her beauty. Now it was time for the food to come down. When the basket came down, the leaders such as So Yowol and Kang Il were already there. Aren't there going to be idiots like Gu Ji-pyong again? Gu Ji-pyong was the name of a child who died a while ago. He made a plan to escape outside by getting in the basket. When the children had all their food, he climbed into the empty basket. However, while the basket was being pulled up high in the air, the rope that tied the basket from above was suddenly cut off. In the end, Gu Ji-pyong fell to the floor and died horribly. The basket did not come down for 3 days after that. Why is there only this much? The amount of food has decreased. What? The smile disappeared from So Yowel's face, and the other leaders couldn't hide their bewildered expressions. Securing food was of paramount importance in this closed place. At first glance, food was reduced by almost a quarter. It could have been seen that there was not much difference, but the amount was so small that it reminded them of starvation for children who were barely satisfying their hunger. The evidence was that even the head children could not hide their bewildered expressions. In the darkness, a red tint lingered in Pyeolwol's eyes. Mak No Sam was a boy who survived the last section and joined the group led by So Yowel. Although he had the smallest build among So Yowel's group, he had pulled his weight through sheer tenacity, and that small boy was now lying dead on the floor. His appearance was truly miserable, as he had been brutally beaten to death. His face was mutilated to the point of being unrecognizable, and his body was full of black bruises. The sight of Makno Sam's corpse was enough to ignite the fury of So Yewol and her followers. Who the hell did this? I won't let this go, you bastards. The children erupted in anger. It was difficult to believe their own eyes. There was only one reason for Makno Sam's death. He was the weakest link in So Yowel's group, and it was said that he had a habit of sparingly eating his rationed food. There were still traces of food on his hands. It meant he was attacked before he even had the chance to eat. Song Qianwu frowned and asked the children, "Did anyone see who did this?" Everyone shook their heads. "Damn, we need to know who did this to get revenge." "It doesn't matter who. What are you talking about? It doesn't matter who made Makno Sam this way. The important thing is that someone who followed us died. If we decide to stay still, everyone will start to look down on us. We must take revenge now in the same manner." So Yowol did not say who the target would be, but Song Qianwu already knew who she meant. A weak and powerless child, the youngest among another group, they were So Yowol's targets. That night, the group led by So Yowol moved in secret, and the weakest child in Go Youngsun's group was killed. It was the beginning of the war. Pyeolwol scratched the wall with his fingernail. It had been a while since he last scraped moss from the wall. He brushed a considerable amount into his mouth at once. It still tasted disgusting, but it was better than starving. The children's war had also reached Pyeolwol. The brutality was so intense, it was hard to believe it was carried out by children in their early to mid-teens. It was difficult at first, but once blood had been spilled, hesitation disappeared. If they didn't find the courage to kill, they would be the ones to die. Food was scarce, and it was impossible for everyone to share equally. Every night, someone turned up dead. One night, it would be someone from So Yowol's group. Another night, someone from Yam Ilyongzing's. Distrust spread rapidly. Children began to leave their groups, convinced their leaders could not protect them. Many chose to survive on their own. The 4 large groups splintered into 8 smaller ones. The children no longer trusted each other. Food continued to decrease day by day, and their fighting grew fiercer. Fortunately, none had yet dared to enter the space where Pyoul stayed. Instinctively, they feared the deep darkness of the area where they were originally confined. Even with torches, they hesitated to step into that abyss. Thanks to that, Pyoul had lived more comfortably than the others. He could eat moss in peace, but that peace ended today. A faint rustle reached his ears, the sound of footsteps brushing the floor. It was so subtle that only someone with senses as sharp as Pyoul's could detect it. Not just one or two, at least four people were moving together. Since his residence was deep in the cavern, no one would arrive there by mistake. They had come for him deliberately, for a bad purpose. Are you sure this is the right place? Yeah, I'm certain. Why is it so dark? I can't even see anything in front of me. Their voices echoed in the chamber, even whispered. They carried far without anything to absorb the sound. One child finally lit his torch. He wanted to stay hidden, but with no visibility he had no choice. In the flickering light, their faces appeared. Yom Iljung and three boys who followed him. After losing one eye to Pyoul, Yom Iljung had longed for revenge, but the memory of that day still haunted him. If not for the lack of food, he might have continued to delay his revenge, but starvation and constant death had hardened him. He had killed two children himself. Now, he thought he was ready to kill Pyoul. After killing him, he planned to take on So Yowel and Kang Il and rise as sole leader of the underground community. That was his end goal. He lifted his torch and scanned every corner, but Pyoul was nowhere in sight. Their expressions grew uneasy. Then, Yom Iljung snapped his head toward him. What's wrong? Something bit my foot. The boy collapsed, foam bubbling at his mouth, his face turning black. Something shifted in the darkness. Yom Iljung swung his torch toward the sound, but saw nothing. Another boy screamed. He too was suddenly down, and something black darted away in the shadows. It moved like lightning, appearing behind the last boy. You bastard! The boy swung his fist, sharp and well-aimed, but the shadow blurred and flickered like a candle flame. The shadow coiled around his neck like a snake. The black shadow was Pyoul. Let him go, Yom Iljung shouted, torchlight casting sharp shadows over Pyoul's face. Fear returned, flooding back stronger than ever. He had seen Pyoul crush three boys in an instant without even knowing how. The strangled boy was running out of breath. Pyoul knew this was the crossroads. If he killed the boy, he would become a murderer, exactly what their captors wanted. But in this world, hesitation was death. The red gleam in his eyes flared. But Pyoul tightened his grip. The boy's struggles weakened. His tongue lolled, and soon he lay lifeless. He had no vital signs. Pyoul had crossed the line. Yom Iljung stepped back, trembling. Though he himself had killed, Yom Iljung cursed Pyoul for the same. But Pyoul had grown stronger, sharpened by darkness and poison, stronger than Yom Iljung could ever be. The fear Pyoul had planted in him was unshakable. His trembling legs and sweat-drenched face proved it. Pyoul stepped closer. Spare me. I'll be your subordinate. You'll need me. I'm sure you'd be obedient at first. But in time, your fear of me would fade, and you'd try the same again. No, you're wrong. Before he could finish, Pyoul vanished from sight. Bam! Pain exploded in his chin. His vision blurred. Pyoul wrapped an arm around his neck and squeezed. Yom Iljung struggled, but Pyoul didn't let go. He whispered, "The reason I'm killing you is because I'm still weak." The group that had followed Yom Iljung was disbanded. Both Yom Iljung and his henchmen were found dead. Their corpses shocked the children, who were already embroiled in quarrels in the underground cave. As food dwindled, murder became routine, but never had so many children died at once. Among the deceased was Yom Iljung himself, the leader of a group. Though he had once been humiliated by Pyoul, no one could ignore Yom Iljung. He had been one of the strongest figures in this underground community. It's Pyoul. He killed all of Yom Iljung's group. After the killings among the children, Yom Iljung had openly threatened to kill Pyoul. That's why the children knew he would one day seek revenge. Yom Iljung had gone to confront Pyoul and had lost his life in the process. How strong is he? To kill 4 people alone, that demon-like child, you can't fight someone like him. Fear of Pyoul had deeply rooted itself in the children's minds. Since then, the fight for food continued. Children continued to die day after day, but no one dared approach Pyoul's territory. He's clever and ruthless. He knows how to make people fear him, Go Youngzon murmured. He was also a group leader. To protect his own, he too had been forced to kill. Some children even suggested negotiation. Why don't we work with the other groups? If we reduce what we eat even slightly, we wouldn't have to kill each other. But the authorities who locked them here had already reduced food distribution to nearly 3/4. How much less it could become was unknown. To survive, the children had no choice but to kill. That's why he took Yom Iljung's eyes and didn't join any group, Go Youngsan thought. Everyone knew they were destined to become murderers. Pyeolwol killed one of the leaders at the perfect time, imprinting the truth of his absolute strength in their minds. Go Young-san trembled at Pyeolwol's scheme. He was older, experienced, and had met many people, but few had such a vicious heart at such a young age. Never approach Pyeolwol. He's different, he warned his members. But he's alone. That's what makes him terrifying. Nothing is scarier than someone with nothing to protect. Don't even try to touch him. Yes, okay. The children had no choice but to agree. Boss. A child came running from the other side, the one Go Young-zan had sent to scout. Fast and sharp-witted, he reported, there are 2 kids at the red house in the north. I think they're from So Yowl's group. Are you sure? Yes, I checked several times. Go Young-san bit his lip. What about their food? They have potatoes. If we don't go now, they'll eat them. The children's eyes sharpened. Hunger could drive them to murder for a single potato. Go Young-san hesitated briefly but had already decided. As the scout said, 2 children were peeling potatoes. At the sight of the potatoes, Go Young-san's children's eyes changed drastically. Kill them. Even before Go Young-san could order, they rushed. The potato holders screamed and ran, startled. Something felt wrong to Go Young-san. A scream pierced the air. A child ran from the front, his head shattered, collapsing. Behind the alley, someone had smashed him with a club. Hidden children emerged. So Yowl's trap had sprung. Damn it, everyone back! Go Young-san shouted, but it was too late. So Yowl's group had completely surrounded them. So Yowl and Son Qianwu appeared among the children. Ho ho, 1 potato, and we've caught a big fish. Fewer mouths to feed this time. So Yowl laughed coldly, victorious. How dare you? What can you do by glaring? Go. Young-zan gritted his teeth. They were outnumbered. The terrain was against them. Panic ran through the group. Can't you end it with just me? He begged. The food situation won't allow that. Will you only be satisfied after killing them all? If you were in my place, you'd do the same. Stop pretending otherwise. So Yowl's face stayed cold. Food from outside was decreasing. If their numbers didn't reduce, everyone would starve. She had no time to pity others. Kill them all. Her group rushed forward. Children fought brutally. Clumsy in martial arts, their determination to kill rivaled seasoned fighters. Their attacks were savage fists, pounded faces, teeth tore flesh. Adults rarely kill with bare hands. These children did it easily, looking like wild beasts. Pyeolwol watched from a nearby pavilion. He observed every move, noting their skill in using terrain and deception. So that's how it is, he muttered. He realized the captor's intentions. The children were being molded into killers. This place is likely a miniature or replica of a larger, influential estate. It's designed to accustom us to killing on their terrain. Pyeolwol stood, red light in his eyes. They're turning us into assassins. So Yowl basked in the glow of her overwhelming victory, a small, triumphant smile on her lips. Her group shared the same intoxicated sense of elation. But not everyone felt triumphant. Some children trembled under the weight of a terrible guilt. Li Min was one of them. Today she had killed another child. Blood stained her small white hands. She had washed them countless times, yet the smell lingered, clinging to her as if following her. Li Min exhaled softly. Her eyes were red and bloodshot, strained from forcing herself to cry. Kike, did you see him? The guy I strangled. He looked like a crucian carp gasping for air. It was exhilarating. Our leader is truly the best. The children devoured the food they had stolen from the Go Young-zan group, chatting casually about their exploits as if nothing were amiss. They had grown accustomed to blood. It had become natural to them. It was disgusting. No, the truly disgusting thing was being among them. Li Min felt a deep revulsion she could not suppress. Clang. A dull noise echoed from the underground ceiling. The children looked up suspiciously. A massive basket was descending. Excitement surged. Surely it carried food. You have to secure as much as you can, so Yowl ordered. Yes, boss, will do. Her group responded with fierce enthusiasm. With the Go Yun-san group gone, no rival remained to challenge them. Some groups survived, but none dared compete with So Yowl. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd, seeking Pyeolwol. Among all the children, he alone unsettled her. At last, So Yowl's gaze found him. But Pyeolwol's expression was peculiar, stiff, wary. Her eyes flicked to the basket instead. Pyeolwol's gaze was fixed there. Then it happened. People emerged from the basket. Adults. Masked adults wielding metal bats. The children screamed as violence erupted. What's happening? The masked men struck without mercy. Any child who resisted was quickly overpowered. No poison, no cunning, no experience of murder could save them from trained adult fighters. Flesh was struck and broken. Children, immature and fragile, were trampled. So Yowl bent like a shrimp under the blows. Pyeolwol did the same. He could have escaped into the darkness, but doing so risked drawing attention. He allowed the assault to continue, knowing survival depended on restraint. The baskets continued descending, each new wave carrying more masked adults. Then he saw them, three distinct figures with masks marked Tai, Hai, and Sai. They were different, terrifyingly so. They surveyed the hall. Every child was on the ground, broken and beaten. Not even So Yowl's leadership or their poison skills could withstand such overwhelming force. Pyoel shivered. They didn't see the children as human, only as tools, as consumables to be tamed. The masked man with Phi raised his hand, and the violence ceased immediately. The others stepped back. I am called First Sword E, Hai, she declared. From now on, this place and your lives belong to me. There are no exceptions. A small group leader tried to speak but was struck down instantly. His head rolled, a brutal warning. The children understood. An even harsher hell had opened. The survivors, 49 children, remained from over 300. 200 had perished from starvation or despair. 50 had died in the brutal food wars. Those who remained were poisonous to the core, hardened by suffering. They bowed and feigned fear, but their eyes betrayed their hatred. They are cursed poison, First Sword murmured. Like insects in a jar, the children had devoured each other in competition. The last ones standing were the most venomous, the most cunning tools of unparalleled potential. The real question, could they control these children? So Yowl was the most dangerous, leading the largest group. Others, like Song Qianwu and Kang Il, were also noteworthy for their martial talent. The masked adults observed through hidden cameras, fully aware of the underground facility's operations. Built long ago by mages, the facility was now repurposed for raising these cursed poison children. First Sword asked quietly, "How about that lone survivor? If it's Pyoel, he's still alive." He had endured the harshest conditions with minimal resources, a feat that even impressed the masked men. "Keep an eye on him, he's not normal." They had 6 years to complete their plan. Only the strongest would survive, and those who did would be weapons beyond measure. Alone, First Sword unfolded a note from his bosom, privy only to the Blood Phantom Group captain, requesting the assassination of duration 7 years. Reward 500,000 gold. Condition: leave no trace related to the Blood Phantom Group. The third sword threw a booklet in front of the children. Learn this starting today. On the cover of the booklet were 4 characters: thunder-splitting cultivation technique. The children looked at it with puzzled expressions, and the third sword continued. I'll give you 3 months. You must learn this within that time. The third sword made the children sit cross-legged and follow the breathing technique of the cultivation method. Masked men surrounded them to ensure compliance. Inner chi isn't generated in a day or two. The human body is at its purest right after birth, when properly utilizing the breathing method could generate a tremendous amount of internal energy. Prestigious clans use techniques like bone marrow cleansing to prepare children's bodies for cultivation, which made their progress far faster than ordinary children. Pyawul and the others couldn't undergo such treatments. They had to prepare their bodies gradually. Under their watchful eyes, the children practiced relentlessly. Mornings were spent on the thunder-splitting cultivation technique, afternoons on physical training. Those who lagged were harshly corrected. The final battle ahead is your goal. The first to arrive rests. The last will face hell, the third sword declared. Children ran with all their might. Custodians attacked from hidden positions, striking those who tried to cut corners. Pyoel understood the true purpose of the training, to detect hidden custodians and find a safe path. He deliberately passed near a hiding assassin and was struck, but endured and ran on. From the fortress's high point, first and second sword observed. Some children were beaten, others, like So Yowel, avoided attacks entirely. She excelled in judgment, courage, and execution, despite her physical disadvantage as a girl. Song Qianwu and others were also commended. What about Pyoel? He's mediocre. Not particularly outstanding, came the assessment. Disappointed, the swords held back judgment, waiting to see further progress. Exhausted, the children fell asleep. Pyoel maintained average performance, which suited his plan. He clutched the thunder-splitting cultivation technique booklet. Others had grown familiar with the method and stopped reading it, but Pyoel monopolized the original copy. He felt ki stirring in his dantian, something the other children couldn't sense. Even So Yowel hadn't felt it yet. Pyoel suspected he was either more sensitive to ki or had a special affinity with the technique. He needed to verify this by studying the original copy. Sitting cross-legged, he began to read, listening to only the sound of paper flipping in the darkness. They're growing faster than I thought. If this is the case, I think 5 years is enough instead of 6. In fact, the time period of 6 years was chosen not because the target is that strong, but to erase traces as much as possible and achieve perfection. You cannot underestimate the target. He possesses the most talent in all of Sichuan province. To deal with such a talent, perfect preparation is not enough. because if we make any sort of mistake, then entire Blood Phantom group may be annihilated. Isn't that why the captain recruits and trains these children who have nothing to do with the Blood Phantom Corps? Even if they fail, there will be no problem. That's also the reason why they never take off their masks. They cannot show their faces to children to hide their identity. The sword apologized. Sorry, I didn't mean to underestimate the target. I know, still, you must be fully alert. Yes, sir, the second sword replied vigorously. Now, let's teach the children assassination techniques. All right, push the children even more. A lot of them will die, but the ones to survive will become even stronger. The custodian formed the children into two pairs and threw them each a dagger. Pyolwol is paired with a child named Gok Sucheng. The sound of children swinging daggers echoed in the underground cave. The custodians only gave them a sword but did not correct the posture nor give any detailed instructions. It was as if they had finished their work just by telling them about the swordsmanship. At that moment, the dagger of Gok Sucheng flew at a speed that could not be compared with before. His dagger was aimed precisely at Pyolwol's throat. It wasn't just a faint stabs like before, but he was actually starting to attack with murderous intent. Pyolwol's sword deflected Gok Sucheng's sword. The fight would normally have stopped at this point, but Gok Sucheng rushed at Pyolwol like a demon. The murderous intent he harbored was real. He really wants to kill Pyolwol. Even the custodian who was watching from nearby knew that fact. But the custodian did not stop the actions of Gok Sucheng. Rather, he looked at them with interest. With a smile full of madness, Gok Sucheng dug into Pyolwol's arms. In a moment of crisis, Pyolwol threw away his dagger, because it felt clunky. Pyolwol stretched out his legs and kicked Gok Sucheng's stomach. As Gok Sucheng was swept away due to the strong impact, Pyolwol immediately went for Gok Sucheng's wrist and twisted it. As his wrist rotated, a hollow bone protruded through the flesh. The first sword approached after hearing Gok Sucheng scream. He looked at Gok Sucheng lying on the ground, holding his broken wrist with a cold, indifferent gaze. The first sword's eyes quickly shifted to Pyolwol. Did you do this? Yes. Swing. In an instant, a sharp sound rang out. Pyolwol saw a glint in front of his eyes, a sword imperceptibly drawn and aimed at his neck. Pyolwol's shoulders trembled. Even with his trained eyesight, he couldn't perceive the exact moment the sword was drawn. It was a terrifyingly fast strike. It was Pyolwol's first time seeing a human wield a sword with such speed after witnessing the first sword skills. It was mind-blowing. Am I going to die? For the first time, Pyolwol confronted the concept of death. He had assumed wounding Gok Sucheng wouldn't lead to punishment because that's how things had always been. He thought the adults only valued useful tools, children's lives were insignificant. Pyolwol forced himself to maintain a calm expression. Revealing fear could provoke disappointment, and the sword might swing again. The pressure on his neck intensified. At this rate, it would pierce through muscle and flesh. Then, suddenly, the pressure vanished. The first sword had withdrawn and sheathed his weapon. An assassin leaves no traces. Breaking a wrist and leaving marks is no different from revealing your strength and identity. Remember this, never leave a mark. Pyolwol remained silent, knowing that sometimes silence was more effective than speaking. Perhaps satisfied with his reaction, the first sword turned and left without another word. Pyolwol exhaled slowly, yet reminded himself, not yet, I must remain alert. He kept his nerves sharp. Gok Sucheng eventually died. Time passed, training became harsher. The instructors pushed the children to their limits. The children practiced the turtle breathing technique to hide their presence, slowing heart rates and vital functions to mimic death. Mastering it required deep knowledge of the body, and even then, discomfort and unnaturalness could give away the user. Jianpyeong stabbed the floor with his knife. A child hiding nearby screamed, revealing himself. Jianpyeong's blade lodged in the child's shoulder. If I were an enemy, you'd already be dead. The child could only grit his teeth, frustrated that his stealth was exposed despite his efforts. Jianpyeong continued, seeking the next child. One by one, he caught those hiding nearby. Only one remained. Jianpyeong concentrated, but couldn't find the last child. He widened his senses, checking the entire area. Nothing. Where is he? It was inconceivable that a child had broken the rules to escape. Jianpyeong searched repeatedly, but the child was nowhere to be found. Finally, he gave up. I can't find you. Come out now. Suddenly, the ground shook right beside him. He was hiding this close. Jianpyeong was astounded. The child had been right next to him all along. To think his skills are already good enough to deceive me. He felt the blood in his body chill. It was the first real sense of danger he had felt since retiring from the life of an assassin. Pyolwol opened his mouth. Now that training is over, can I take a break? Why? Yes. Pyolwol bowed slightly to Jianpyeong and turned around. He could feel Jianpyeong's burning gaze behind him, but he ignored it. He had been in hiding for 3 days, practicing the turtle breathing technique. Perfecting the technique had hardened his muscles and weakened his organs. To recover properly, he needed a quick breakfast. He headed to the largest hall. Secret gazes followed him. It was the eyes of the children. Who is this? Why did you bring your precious body here? A child appeared, tall with a long neck and sullen gaze. His name was So-gyeok-san, nicknamed Soul Eater Wolf by the others. So-gyeok-san came from an arts troupe and was a master of the sword. He could change faces instantly, layering silk over a face or using dead children's skins in a terrifyingly realistic way. Pyo-wol asked, "Your face has changed again. Is it Yu Kwang'in's face?" "He croaked recently, so I'm using his face." "You might have forgotten your real face by now." "Who cares? We can't get out anyway. If I didn't do this, I'd have gone crazy already." Pyo-wol entered the hall. It was cozy, warm, and alive. The children were making a bonfire and grilling food. Pyo-wol naturally sat among them. Even though they hadn't seen each other for a while, there was no hostility. "Food quality has improved recently," said So-Yewol, adding wood to the fire. Her deep, clear eyes seemed to suck people in. Pyo-wol realized, it seems a mission is about to be given. Even pigs get good food before being caught. He met So-Yewol's gaze. Her eyes mirrored his realization. "We will be put on a mission soon," she said. The bonfire flared violently, dyeing the children's faces red. First Sword took off his mask with a heavy sigh. An expression of an elderly man appeared. In the middle of the old man's face, a deep black scar was carved diagonally. It was a wound he suffered when he was put on his first mission. The assassin, who people would tremble when they heard his name, was now an old man who's over 60 years old. The name of the First Sword was Lim Seol. However, his name was only known to him and the captain. He was usually just called the First Sword, so he had never heard his name through anyone else's mouth. His name seemed unfamiliar. "I guess the time for me to die is nearing." For me to be so sentimental. For the past 6 years, he's been pushing the kids really hard. They didn't even care about sacrificing the children. He only cared about raising children successfully. As a result, 30 children passed all the tests and became assassins. From the 300 people who were first deployed, only a tenth of them survived. Compared to him who started from the bottom, the children here are more fortunate. They received systematic training to become an assassin. The door opened and the second sword and third sword entered. They were startled to see the First Sword taking off his mask. It's the first time for them to see Lim Seol take off his mask since coming here. "Why did you take off your mask? It's just stifling. Don't you think 6 years is enough? You're free to take it off as well." The second sword and third sword looked at each other. After quarreling for a while, they took off their masks. They simply had their mask removed, but the air coming into their lungs seemed different. For them, masks did not simply work to cover their faces. When they were wearing their masks, they felt no sense of ethics or guilt. To them, walking the path of assassins, the mask was an indulgence and another face. They don't feel any guilt while wearing the mask, but after taking it off like this, they seem to feel weak without realizing it. The name of the second sword was Gu Shinheng, and the name of the third sword was Sang Ilshin. The three of them took off their masks, revealing their true faces, and sat down at the table. Lim Seol said, "Alcohol is best drank at times like this. What a pity. We can drink as much as we want when we get out here, can't we?" There was a glimmer of anticipation on the faces of Gu Shinheng and Sung Ilshin. They spent 6 years here teaching the children. "Their skills have improved beyond our expectations, so I'm quite hesitant." "Why? Are you afraid you won't be able to control them?" "Yes. Some children have already gone beyond the level of the instructors. Jiam Pyong said that he did his best, but he couldn't find Pyo-wol who practiced the turtle breathing technique. It's a waste." "What do you mean?" "The fact is that we have to use them once and immediately throw them away. We can't help it. Because that was the original contract's request after all. Who the hell is the target of the assassination? Do we really have to do this? Now that the mission is almost over, don't we need to know too? I'm sorry, I can't tell you until the mission is over. Now we must begin the final step." Lim Seol's gaze turned to the desk. An anonymous booklet was placed on the desk. The children looked at Lim Seol with curious eyes. To be precise, they were looking at the booklet in Lim Seol's hand. There were no letters written on the yellow cover. It was literally an unknown booklet. Lim Seol said, throwing an unknown booklet among the children, "3 of you must learn this." The children frowned at Lim Seol's incomprehensible words. "In this booklet, the martial arts technique of a certain faction is roughly arranged. 3 of you must master this technique, while the remaining 27 must attack those who have mastered this technique and succeed. This will be the last time. After this training, we won't do any training until we get out of here." Lim Seol's words shook the children's hearts. In the meantime, the children hadn't let down their guard. That's because the instructors severely pushed them hard. Thanks to that, the children's minds became as devastated as a desert, and they stopped trusting anyone. If there is one wish they have, it is that they want to rest in peace, even for a moment. But as if trying to pierce their hearts, Lim Seol came out with the sweet bait of rest. It was a proposal that is bound to shake the hearts of the children. With only 3 sacrifices, the remaining 27 people could rest comfortably. They just don't have to belong among the 3 people who would be learning the unknown martial art technique. Pyeolwol looked at the unknown booklet thrown on the floor. It was not known which swordsmanship was written on the anonymous booklet. However, it was clear that the result would be different from the martial arts they had learned so far. Pyeolwol was greedy for an unknown booklet. The problem is that once you learn the martial art technique, he would become a target for other children. If Pyeolwol would become the target of the children who learned how to kill to the extreme like So Yawol, Song Cheon-woo, and Kang Il, it would not be easy to handle. They threw the poison bait properly. The other children did not know, but the bait that Lim Seol threw was very tempting to Pyeolwol. There is a high probability that the martial arts in the booklet are the martial arts that our target of assassination is learning. Even if it is not exactly the same, he must be learning martial arts similar to it. Pyeolwol made his decision. When he picked up the booklet that had fallen on the floor, the attention of the children was focused. I'll learn this martial arts technique. The other 2 can decide for themselves. When he picked up the booklet that had fallen on the floor, the attention of the children was focused. Are you deciding to be a scapegoat of your own accord? So Yawol asked with an expression that showed she did not understand Pyeolwol's decision. Well, whether I will become a scapegoat or a wolf remains to be seen. You'd better be careful. Everyone in this room will be aiming for you. I'm looking forward to it. Pyeolwol waved to So Yawol, and the children then headed to the dark area where his room was. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.